One of these three ain't like the other. That's right, guys. We have a 2022 Nissan Pathfinder. We also have a first generation and a third generation Pathfinder. And in this video, we're going to talk about the differences that led up to this vehicle. What we have here is a 1995 Nissan Pathfinder, and it's a huge success back in the day. Early 90s, this was the vehicle to get. A lot of people in California, at least where I grew up, loved these. They had a two-door version of it, which I actually had one for about a year that I drove on and off, and it was stout and it was very capable off-road. The thing is, this one with the four doors became very popular for the Americans because it had, well, four doors. And the other thing is that the WD-21 platform, basically Nissan hard body underneath, so it handled and rode like a pickup truck. This is a 2008 Nissan Pathfinder. This is a third generation based on the R51 platform. And what makes it interesting is that Nissan went from their second generation, which was unit body, back to proper frame-based truck. That's right, there's a frame underneath, which makes it very stout and extremely heavy. It also means that this vehicle was able to use a big V8, a big V6, which is what it has, and there were diesels. And here's the crazy part about this particular vehicle. They're still building them overseas and selling them just under a different name. That name you may actually recall, Xterra. And this is the 2022 Nissan Pathfinder, a completely different vehicle from the other two. It's based on the R53 platform, and it shares a lot of components with the previous generation Nissan Pathfinder. Both of those, this one and that one, are essentially unit body with front wheel drive, and then you could have all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive as an option. The thing about this vehicle is that it has an all-new interior, pretty much all-new sheet metal, and something very different right about where I'm standing. I still love the way the first generation Nissan Pathfinder looks. This grille and these kind of sort of openings look really macho. They really did a great job as making it a little bit different than the pickup truck, and yet at the same time it's definitely related to them. Now, by the way, proper four-wheel drive vehicle needs ground clearance, and this has 7.87 inches of ground clearance. In other words, just under 8 inches of ground clearance. But the overall look is pretty manly. Just like the first generation, the third generation Nissan Pathfinder shares a lot with its pickup truck brethren. So if you put this next to a Frontier, they look the same. Well, a lot alike. The grille is a little bit different on this vehicle, so it's sort of unique. They put a huge emblem up front. This is the first time Nissan's really done that on a vehicle at the time. And then everything else has been kind of left alone, kind of like the pickup truck. One thing that is a little disturbing to some people is that the front, this is plastic. It's not a real skid plate. Oh, and by the way, maximum ground clearance available for these vehicles was 8.8 inches. Once again, Nissan styled a vehicle, a Pathfinder, to look similar to their truck. So if you look at the new Frontier that's coming out soon, there are some similarities here. If you look at the Armada, there's some similarities here. But it also has its own identity, and I give them a lot of credit because the previous generation, well, it looked a little wimpy by comparison, no matter what you did to it. There is one issue, of course, the same thing with the third generation, and that is this fake skid plate. I really wish that companies would either put steel there or put nothing there. Still, the overall design of this vehicle is good looking. One final thing in terms of design up front, these three slots, they're supposed to be reminiscent of the first generation Nissan Pathfinder. And this vehicle has 7.2 inches of maximum ground clearance. If you look at the side of this vehicle, I think it's the most distinctive part of the first generation Pathfinder, and that has to do with these blistered fenders. They're one of the first car companies to really make something look tough, off-road worthy, and almost like a rally vehicle or something along those lines. And I loved it, and so did a lot of people who bought these, especially when you look at the big, fat, chunky tires that are within. Now, there were different sizes available. Obviously, these are aftermarket tires that Tommy's been loving, and there were different wheel designs as well. As a matter of fact, there was this 3-spoke wheel design that came on the very first generation of this vehicle with the 2-door setup, and it looks fantastic. But overall, from the side, you can't mistake it for any other vehicle. Don't tell me this looks like a 4Runner, because it doesn't. It is unique, and that's what makes it special. Oh, and one final thing. It weighs about 2 tons, and it's about 172 inches long and about 66 inches wide. Those measurements matter, and I'll show you why with the next one. You may have noticed this is a much bigger vehicle than the first generation. It's about 192 inches long and around 73 inches wide, significantly larger than the previous vehicle, partly because it has set up for a 3rd-row seat, and partly because the platform it's based on is just a bigger, chunkier, longer, huge component. Off-road, this vehicle looks really good. It's one of those that looks good dirty. So does the first generation. So it is a proper truck. Oh, and one final thing about this proper truck. It weighs a lot like a proper truck, nearly 5,000 pounds. At approximately 198 inches long and approximately 78 inches wide, the new 2022 Nissan Pathfinder is massive when you compare it to the first generation. It's a lot bigger than the 3rd generation as well. So it's a big vehicle, but it is built to hold 8 people comfortably, and that's part of the reason why it's so massive. On top of that, this vehicle is fairly light for its size, starting at around 4,300 pounds and moving up from there. A vehicle like this is lighter than the 3rd generation, and that has to do with the fact that the 3rd generation has a big, beefy frame. People don't treat this engine with the respect it deserves. Maybe because it puts out 153 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque. It's the VG30E V6. It's a 3-liter, and yeah, okay, it's not very powerful. It's not very efficient. Combined MPG is 15. This one is connected to a 4-speed automatic transmission. There was a 5-speed manual transmission that was available, which would give you better performance and better fuel mileage. Here we go. This is the mighty VQ engine. It's the VQ40DE. This is a 4-liter V6. Puts out 266 horsepower, 288 pound-feet of torque. This one is hooked up to a 5-speed automatic transmission. However, there were options for manual transmissions. Another thing to keep in mind is that they did have a V8 option, the same one that they had in the Armada and the Titan, that they would shove in here as well, which I thought about getting, but it was too expensive and the gas mileage was pretty horrible. Now, this one does get 16 miles per gallon combined, which is only 1 better than the old one. However, it's a much bigger vehicle. Check it out, guys. What you're looking at here is a V6, which is pointed in a different direction than the other 2 vehicles, and that's because it's a front-wheel drive vehicle that also can be 4-wheel drive. This is the VQ35DE, better known as the 3.5-liter V6 that puts out 284 horsepower and 259 pound-feet of torque. The big news here is that it's hooked up to a 9-speed automatic transmission. That's all new. They got rid of the CVT. Now they have the 9-speed. It's built by ZF, and it powers the front wheels, or if you get the all-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive version of this, all 4 wheels. This vehicle, if you get it in the premium package, very, very top platinum like this one, you're getting 22 mpg combined. If you get the lesser models, which are a little bit lighter, you're getting 23 miles per gallon combined. If you've been watching TFL Off-Road or TFL Classics, you've seen this vehicle off-road with Andre and Tommy. And it's done very well, and it has a very old school, very simple setup for 4-wheel drive. No fancy electronics or anything like that, unlike the other vehicles. There's something else. This vehicle is rated to tow a maximum of 3,500 pounds. There are a variety of different 4-wheel drive packages available for the 3rd generation Nissan Pathfinder. Everything from a locking rear diff. Also, there was this electric brake locking diff, which is basically your brakes preventing the wheel from spinning and providing more power so both wheels can go. That was basically the system that they had. But on top of that, it was available with an all-wheel drive style system called auto. Basically, you put it in auto, and if the rear wheels slip, they'll send power to the front wheels, and off you go. This one has that, and it works. Also, this vehicle, as it sits, is rated to tow up to 6,000 pounds. If you put the V8 in here, up to 7,000 pounds. The new Pathfinder has an all-wheel drive / four-wheel drive system that can send up to 50% of the torque to the rear wheels. Roman has recently taken this vehicle off-road, and there is a video out there on that, and I highly recommend you check it out. So it does have four-wheel drive of sorts, and it does have a hitch. And guess what? This is the crazy part. It tows up to 6,000 pounds, which is one of the best in class, and exactly the same as the third generation Nissan Pathfinder. Now, just so you guys know, one of the things that people started to dislike was this, the swinging tire option. Some people love it for overlanding and off-roading, but if you're picking up groceries, not so much, because you have to go through that, and then you have to open up the rear. Now, this did have, I love this. I love having these vehicles do this. See that interior? I already folded down the seats for you on one side. 79.5 cubic feet of cargo space. This is actually pretty cavernous, but considering the size difference, you're going to understand why I think this number is pretty wild. So just like the first generation, the third generation did have this, which is super handy. I actually hauled kayaks this way once. It's a long story. Before you think that this is massive, it's really not. And one of the reasons why is because everything is so high up there. It does have a third row seat. I folded everything so you guys can get an idea of how flat it is in there. However, here's the crazy part. Maximum cargo space in this vehicle, 79.2 cubic feet. That is less than the first generation. I think that's crazy. And just like that, whammo bammo, Trunco opens. Now, it doesn't have the popping rear glass, which is a shame. I actually like having that for extra utility. But it does have a very low loading floor compared to the other one, and you can fold the seats flat. Now here's the part that makes this vehicle worthwhile, 80.2 cubic feet of cargo space. One of the reasons why is it doesn't have a frame. So it's wide, it's long, and it can hold a lot. One thing I really like about these older SUVs is the seat height. Check this out. I go straight in like a lazy man that I am. I don't have to lift up or go down. So that helps for my stubby legs. Very basic, very simple interior. I'm actually very comfortable here. Now, one thing you will notice is that the headroom in this one is not very good. So the roof is pretty low. But in exchange, you get a very airy cockpit. These windows are massive by comparison. They actually sit lower than my arm instead of arm, elbow and armpit height. And one final thing is that the backseat comfort, it's not too bad. Let me show you. That door handle is way up here. Cool little design thing. Nissan did it specifically so the vehicle wouldn't look that much different than the two-door version, which came first. Now, yes, I hit my head getting in here. And now that I'm back here, I do not have a ton of headroom, but it's more than a lot of crossovers I've been in, and legroom's not too bad, considering that right now I'm sitting behind where Roman would have his seating position. He was the last one to play with this, I think, and he's over 6'2". I've got good knee room. My feet do not completely fit under the rear seat. In fact, they don't at all. One final thing about this setup is that the way the seats are split, even though you can get 3 people in here, whoever's sitting in the middle is going to have an interesting wedgie. Now this one I'm used to, and that's because, well, I own it. So I know when to tuck my head, and I know exactly how much space I actually have. Now, fortunately, this one does have the sunroof, so it drops a little bit here, but this area here, as long as I keep the sunroof open, I'm able to wear big hats. Overall, the design is fairly easy to work with. Other things that are actually pretty interesting is the fact that it does have a separate storage up here, and of course a regular glove compartment down here. Plus, they added more cup holders, including in the doors, more storage right here. It's a very utilitarian, simple setup. Let me show you the back seats. Another vehicle that has that high handle. Now it's a thing that Nissan puts on those vehicles, the third generation, because they thought they were being funny, I guess. Little kids can't reach it. I know that from personal experience. Okay, here we are in the second row. Now, second row has a little tiny bit more usable space than the first generation. I have a little bit more headroom. I have vents back here. That's great. And I do have actually the controls that feed these vents down here, plus 2 cup holders. It works out pretty good. You also have a little tiny armrest here, which is great for kids to fight each other over armrests. But the major part of this vehicle is the fact that it has a third row seat, and I'm about to show you that. Accessing the third row, pull the lever, ba-boom, seat goes up like that. Then poor daddy has to get in. So in theory, a big Sasquatch hunk like me can get into the third row. I do have just enough knee room to where if I pulled the other seat down, I could sit for 5 minutes before screaming. The good news is there are vents back here, and there are little pockets for drinks or for popcorn or chips and little bits of them, so you can't get them out. For most people, kids go in the third row, but it's very different in the new Pathfinder. It's a whole different story in the 2022 Nissan Pathfinder, and that's because everything is easier. The floor is lower, the roof is a little bit higher, and the seat is exactly at butt level, which is the same level as the first generation Nissan Pathfinder. I don't think that was done on purpose, but I'll give them props. Look at this interior design. I mean, it's beautiful. Leathers, contrasting stitching. The seats are beautiful and very comfortable. I mean, you expect that the more modern a vehicle gets. Some interesting storage pockets, including this one right here, which is relatively deep, easy enough to hold a cell phone, and of course, your regular glove compartment here, which isn't that big. There's a really nifty pass-through here as well, large enough to hold, well, quite a few things, even a small dog. I wanted to show you just in terms of the basic comfort and size first, before I show you the back seat. All right, conventional handle. Conventional yet very pretty interior. Let me get in. So I'm sitting behind myself and I've got tons of space. The overall feeling in here is quite nice. Part of the reason probably has to do with this massive panoramic sunroof. The third generation has a tiny one. But now it's time to look at the third row. Yay! Now there are a couple different ways to fold the seats, but I'm going to show you something kind of nifty. Let's say you have a child seat in here, but no child, and you want to get into the third row. You push the button, boom. Now I'd like to think that if you left the child in there, it'd be a cool catapult, but unfortunately this system has a safety override in it. If it feels weight, like a child, it won't do that. That's kind of a bummer. So now that the seat is moved, you can see that there's fairly easy access to the third row, which I'm about to show you. Let's see what happens when I fold this back. Well, I will be hornswoggled. Look at that. It's not great space for an adult, but I'm a big guy and I can fit back here and I have pretty decent headroom. I'm actually pretty impressed with that. And once again, you can't get 3 people back here, probably not large ones like me. 2 large ones like me could fit here. But 3 regular people could probably fit back here. Wow. You got a vent here. There are cup holders back here as well. Now remember that button that helped me get in? Well, it'll help you get out too. You push it, whammo bambo, ready to get out. All right, very simple gauge layout. I like it because it's very clear. Basically, it's just showing you gas mileage, water temp, miles per hour, and of course, showing you your revs. Heating, air conditioning system. Once again, very simple setup. I do like the fact that they have separate air conditioning switch. Then you go lower down here, stereo system. This is obviously an aftermarket one. I wish it was a better one, to be honest with you. And then we go down here. The gear lever setup, You do have the ability of shutting off the overdrive, which can be helpful on steep climbs when you're towing. And of course your four-wheel drive lever here, very simple setup, and proper e-brake. But there is one more thing that's really unusual. Over here, one of your switches for your front lights, and then that is your release for your trunk. All right, so over here, some important switches. This is turning on your cruise control, boom. But all the controls for the cruise control are over here on the steering wheel. Very simple setup, of course. Set, cancel, all that, that's here. But there's another switch that is very devious right next to the cruise control, and that's this E-AT auto power. Now, if I turn this on, what it does is it changes the limiter for RPM and shifting. So in other words, it gives you extra power. If you're going off-road or if you're towing, you hit that switch, it'll go closer to the red line before shifting, and it changes the shifting timing a little bit too. The problem with that is that people tend to leave them on, and because of that, they get really, really bad gas mileage in a vehicle that already gets poor gas mileage. Fairly easy to understand gauges here as well. In fact, I like the fact that this is shown. It shows you when you're in two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. That's especially good when you have this auto setting, because sometimes you forget it because it's really transparent. It's like all-wheel drive. So the gauges are cool. Pay attention to this flashing light. I broke one of the TPMS systems in the tire, and as such, that's why I'm getting that. Now this is a 7-inch screen. Obviously not a touch screen. We are talking about 2008 tech, so not much is going to happen with that. But I am able to go to different things here. Tire pressure. Yeah, see, I was telling you about that. It's not working very well. All these buttons here are very easy to use. You know, going back and forth, you know, the different settings. Very simple. Then, of course, your CD player, which I do not use because every CD I have has scratches or skips for some reason. And if you go further down, you're going to see the controls for two-wheel drive, auto, 4 high, and 4 low. This is a really good setup. I do worry that it's not a lever. I prefer that. I do like this setup, and I'm thrilled that this is all over here because it's not important stuff, but whenever my wife gets in here, she spends about an hour playing with this button right here, which moves the pedals up and down and makes it so much easier for other people to drive. And then, of course, heated steering wheel. This is the first vehicle I've ever owned that had a heated steering wheel. And it in Denver, Colorado, in a bad winter, I gotta tell you, that's kind of cool to have. This was the design setup back in those days, and a lot of vehicles had this type of, or this style of design for steering wheel. The good news is all the buttons are very easy to use here. Basically everything on this side is volume control, station control, and everything else, and then everything over here is for cruise control. Very easy setup, easy enough to teach a 16-year-old how to use this without doing too many horrible things to the vehicle. In the new Nissan, well, everything's new. This is a 12.3-inch all digital display, and it's clearly marked. It's easy to read, fairly easy to use as well. I do like the fact that it shows you who's buckled, who's not, stuff like that, just in the center. But you are able to change certain things and add or subtract safety components as you go through here. It's actually pretty nifty stuff. And then we move over to this, which I believe is a 9-inch screen, and that is the optional larger screen over the base model. And this setup here, well, you know, look what you got. It's very simple to use. I do like the fact that Nissan's allowing touch. Unfortunately, I find it to be a little oversensitive, and sometimes it doesn't read your thoughts very well. It's just an issue that I have. Other people don't seem to have that problem. Now, if you go to camera, this is cool. Look at that. You are able to scroll through different camera angles, and there's a ton. Heating, air conditioning controls are basically the same that they've always been. And I like the fact that it has its own section. That's nice. But this, I'm thrilled about. It's a gear lever, not a button, but it still has a button. So everybody's happy, right? And then you have this here. Now this is cool because if you look at that huge center display I was showing you before, I can go from sport to tow, auto, snow, Yeah, obviously that's not available. Come on. Mud and rut, sand. This is great. And it'll change the way this vehicle performs with all these three things. So technically it does have its own tow mode, which is really cool. Also, right here, if you look at the center, hill descent control right there at the push of a button. So two important buttons here. Steering assist, which helps you when you're in need of a little extra boost with the steering. And of course, your trunk release is right here. Going across the steering wheel, you have a ton of things, including paddle shifters. And unlike other CVT vehicles out there that use paddle shifters and are fake, this is real. You can actually hold a gear, which is kind of a nice thing to have. So volume control and everything is on this side for mostly infotainment, and then everything on this side is for driving in terms of cruise control, radar cruise control, distance, and then hands-free phone and questions. So it's able to do all that on this side and all that on this side. And I like the fact that it has a flat bottom. That's nice for a big chunky guy like me. And unlike the other two vehicles, this is a fully adjustable steering wheel. By the way, all servo controlled. Yeah. Just in case you thought that using a lever and doing it on your own was too much effort. Now, it's kind of a metaphor, but the badge sizes through the years is kind of interesting. So here it says Pathfinder. There's another one here on the side glass in case you didn't know it was a Pathfinder by following it. Back then, they liked having lots of stickers and decals. Them days were the 90s, before Tommy was born. Now, if we move up to the third generation, it's a little different. This is the only spot that it says Pathfinder, just here. They wanted this to be a more subdued looking vehicle, a little bit more mature looking maybe, which some people thought was great. They added a really big Nissan emblem here too. But wait till you see what they did with the fifth generation. I love the design of the rear of the new Pathfinder, but I gotta say, that is a really, really big reminder of what this vehicle is. Pathfinder! And not only does it say it here, but also on the side sills. So it kind of is going back to its past, reminding people of exactly what it is. For me, this is more of a forensic way of going through little bits and pieces of these vehicles and how different they are. In the very near future, you're going to see videos that feature driving impressions and pricing for the new Pathfinder, so I can't bring those up. But what I can say is that the evolution is shocking. It goes from first generation, which is a proper little tiny truck, to the second generation, which unfortunately isn't here, but that one is a unit body. Then it goes to the third generation, which is a truck, once again, even beefier truck. Fourth generation basically is very similar to this one, which is a car-based SUV, I like to call it. And then of course, this final one, which is the fifth generation. And this vehicle, as it sits, the way you're looking at it is, oh, I can't see the price either because that's embargoed. But I can say this, so far, everything looks pretty promising. Stay tuned. In the very near future, you're going to get pricing and driving impressions. All right, thanks for joining me for the Fast Lane Car. This is Nathan. I'll see you next time.